Large flakes were falling from the sky, covering everything around them in a white shroud. Stephen stood in the parking lot, not hurrying to get into the car in a sort of daze. He admired the snow surrounding the village. The lights, the lampposts, all the sounds had disappeared, and the people rushing home had turned into faceless, ghostly figures. The man couldn't help himself and stuck out his tongue, catching snowflakes with it, just as his mother had taught him to do when he was a child. And my father used to swear all the time, developmental therapy that lasted the family home. Now Stephen didn't care what the passersby thought about what they saw. It will probably be a snowy winter, he thought. It started to snow late this year. Usually by the end of October, everything is white. This is nothing. It should be like this in winter, if only the roads were cleaned. I would like to go somewhere far away from the city, take a snowmobile and drive around the endless white expanses. And take a vacation? Call John to go hunting, to get away from this madness? The man took a deep breath. Thinking about vacation was unpleasant. They wouldn't let him go anywhere. Things had been tense at the hospital lately. There was a shortage of staff, and they often had to work overtime, but that didn't scare Stephen. I guess there was nothing to do anyway. It's been 4 years since I divorced my wife. She just walked out. Didn't even have to explain anything. Tired of the constant absence of my husband, who was called to an emergency surgery in the middle of the night. Tired of his boundless altruism, which Camille for some reason called selfishness. Stephen rarely did anything for her. Vacation trips were constantly disrupted by emergency surgeries. Trips to the restaurant turned out to be the sudden departure of a man and the tears of a woman. How could he refuse to help people? More than 20 years have passed since Stephen took the Hippocratic Oath, 27 years, and 4 months to be exact. Even then, he was well aware that his personal life would have to be put on the back burner. Being a surgeon meant denying himself everything. And Camille at first shared all the burdens of their life together. Then John was born. Hippity fully devoted herself to raising her son. She even began to react less sharply to her husband's irregular working hours. But John grew up, entered an institute, and then moved out to a rented apartment. Loneliness fell on her, for which she was unprepared. Stephen, as he could, struggled with the despondency of his wife, bought her vouchers to some closed sanatoriums in the mountains, paid for all sorts of fashionable hobbies and courses. That's not what my wife needed. And then, one day, she simply said that she was leaving. She would live alone for a while, come to her senses. But it dragged on for a couple of years. And then Stephen just got a registered letter with divorce papers. He understood everything. It was pointless to clarify relations and persuade Camille to return. He just signed the papers and now he was all alone. Of course, John occasionally visited him, called him to visit. But now his son had a family of his own. A cheerful girl had given birth to 2 beautiful babies. But Stephen had no time to visit. And the son's family rarely left home, so they lived near but far away. Stephen had an empty apartment waiting for him. He was in no hurry to get back here after his shift. Everything reminded him of Camille. He still loved his ex-wife. After a quarter of a century together. Life doesn't spare anyone. And sometimes it turns around so that you just have to sing under its weight. John suggested getting a cat or a dog's, but my father immediately rejected the idea. No time to walk, no tummy stability. He'd just die of homesickness. So he lived alone for 4 years. But Stephen got used to it, especially since he only came home to sleep, and even then, he often spent the night at work. Loneliness for him was somehow conditional. There were always people in the hospital who respected him, because for many years he had earned a reputation as a top-class specialist, ready to do anything for the patient. But this evening, something was wrong. Stephen was very tired. He had 4 surgeries today and was burned out like a lemon. Plus, he got in a fight with the head doctor. It was nothing new, but now it was definitely unrealistic to start talking about a vacation. At least, not in the next couple of months. The man got into his car and slowly drove out of the parking lot. Houses flashed outside the window, brightly lit storefronts trailing headlights of oncoming cars. There was no more traffic, so Stephen got there quickly. Approaching the entrance, the man noticed a girl sitting on a bench. She was dressed in a thin, out-of-weather coat and sat swaying slightly. Her face was somehow plague-like, or maybe it just seemed so in the spotlight. The man knew all the neighbors personally. The house was old. Many of the tenants had been here for years, and this was the first time Stephen had seen this girl. "Hello?" he greeted me. The stranger mumbled in reply and exclaimed loudly. Stephen saw that she was crying. "Excuse me, maybe you need help?" No, replied the girl fearfully. "I'm just leaving. It's okay." She immediately got up from the bench. Even a loose coat couldn't hide the stranger's impressive belly. Pregnant, Stephen thought. A month 7 at least. It's dangerous to go out in this weather. Well, it's none of my business. You'll get in trouble if you make a remark. The girl slowly walked away, and the man went home. The apartment was warm. Stephen immediately began to cook dinner, hastily assembling it from the food that was lying in the refrigerator. It had been Camille's job to do all the cooking, but with her gone, Stephen had had to learn to do it himself. It wasn't very good. Internet videos helped the man learn the basics of cooking, but in a couple of years he developed a simple-to-prepare menus, albeit boring and monotonous. His salary was enough to buy ready-made food in the delivery service and a couple of times a week even afford a dinner in a decent restaurant. But Stephen liked tinkering in the kitchen. It distracted him from the tension accumulated during the day. When dinner was over, the man went out to smoke on the balcony. He started smoking after his divorce. He was getting nervous, and cigarettes helped to calm down at least for a moment. He knew perfectly well that it was harmful, but no one shouted it in his ear. So he just smoked. It was still snowing. There wasn't a single piece of asphalt or lawn left on the street, not a single piece of laundry or roof of the houses covered with it. Snow-covered slides, swings on the playground, neighbors' cars. It was already about midnight. Stephen exhaled smoke into the darkness of the night through peering out the sparse glowing windows in the neighboring houses. I wonder, he thought, what are all these people doing right now? Why aren't they sleeping? Probably some are arguing, some are putting naughty people to bed. Some are suffering, and others, on the contrary, are swooning with happiness in the arms of a loved one. Stephen always liked to look at rectangles of colorful windows, peculiar pockets of life in the unsightly darkness of the bedroom district. He had already smothered the cigarette butt in the ashtray and almost closed the frame, as suddenly his attention was drawn to a tiny figure near the entrance. Stephen gazed at it and realized that it was the same girl who had been sitting in the same spot as a few hours ago. The figure in the thin coat was almost completely abandoned by the snow. The girl did not move. Jesus, horrified Stephen. The most terrible thoughts immediately flashed through his mind. In addition, he remembered that the stranger was pregnant. I hope it's not too late. The man instantly jumped out of the balcony. Without closing the window, threw on his jacket and ran out into the entryway in just slippers and home shorts. There was no time to wait for the elevator. He rushed down the stairs from the 7th floor as fast as it was possible to do it constantly on vegetables and slippers. When he opened the front door, Stephen immediately saw her and almost slipped, but managed to keep his balance. Hey, he called out loudly to the girl, but she didn't react. Are you all right, girl? Stephen shook her gently by the shoulder, The stranger seemed to freeze. The man began to pat her cheeks. Finally, the girl woke up from her dream, and her eyelids fluttered. Snow was falling on her cheek, almost unmelted. "Get up, my dear!" In a trembling voice, Stephen demanded. "Come with me! They'll freeze to death! Leave me alone!" Barely audibly muttered the stranger. "Go where you were going?" "I'm fine, but no," said the man firmly. "I see what kind of order you're in. You don't think about yourself, you fool! What's your child got to do with it?" "None of your business." Suddenly the girl cried out loudly, but tried to press herself against his neck, her hands to his stomach. "So you can get up by yourself. If you can't, I'll carry you." The girl started to resist sluggishly, but it was obvious that she had no strength left. Stephen carefully picked her up and took her in his arms. The girl was incredibly light despite her large belly. After opening the entryway, he carried her inside and reached the elevator. In the elevator, Stephen lowered the girl to the floor, but she could not keep her feet on the ground at all. The seconds stretched unbearably slow. Finally, the elevator reached the 7th floor, and the man brought the girl to the apartment, where he immediately placed her on the couch in the hall. "I'll give you some tea for your aggression. Then you can go wherever you want. Do you understand me?" The girl nodded faintly. The sharp contrast with the temperature paralyzed her muscles. She half lay on the couch, letting Stephen take off her boots and coat. "Quite crazy." The man shook his head when she saw that under the coat the girl was wearing not bruised arms and equally thin sports pants. What kind of young people have gone?" "They're not oriented to the weather at all. It's a miracle I went out for a smoke and saw you. You would have frozen." The man left the girl in the hall and ran to put the kettle on. When he returned, she was still lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling. "What's your name?" he asked. There was no answer. "Oh, okay. You don't want to say it, but I'll introduce myself. Stephen, you can just call me Stephen, but I'm old enough to be your father, if not your grandfather." The girl looked to be in her early 20s, maybe a little more, about the same age as John. Stephen thought to himself, younger even. I wonder what happened to her. The clothes are decent, though out of season, and dirty thoroughly. But the bums killed them. Alcoholics don't look like it. You're just gonna lie there. Let's go to the kitchen. I've given you some tea. If you're hungry, I feed you dinner too. The girl was still silent. Only then Stephen saw that she was crying. What are you doing? Come on, come on. Tears can't help the grief. Everything is fine in Sagra now, and you can't tell everyone. If you're in trouble, I won't abandon you. Yeah, I'll help you as much as I can, especially if you're pregnant. In such cases, it's not the time to be selfish. The girl tried to sit up, but she could not. Oh, Stephen took her in his arms again and carried her into the kitchen. He gently sat her down on a small sofa and placed a large cup of fragrant tea in front of her. Carefully, as if afraid of something, the girl reached for the mug. She took a couple sips and sighed heavily. Thank you, she whispered softly. You're welcome, Stephen replied. How are you feeling? Speak plainly. I'm a doctor, so I can help you if you need it. A doctor? The girl raised her huge eyes to the man. Stephen even felt uncomfortable with that look. The eyes were so light and bright, which was only further emphasized by the beauty that came from the tears. Yes, the doctor nodded. He is a surgeon. Don't be afraid of me. I don't wish you any harm. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come down. Even so, I'd have let you freeze. I'm not afraid. The girl waved her head. I don't care at all. No, honey, you don't. You're still so young and beautiful, and you're expecting a baby. How can that be? I can still understand it if you were a terminally ill old woman, and you don't even realize how much they care. Nobody wants to die until their last breath. I know that very well. Professional look. I do, said the girl, looking past Stephen. What's the point of living when it's like this? How? I could maybe give you a clue. But you're not really in the mood for dialogue. You won't even tell me your name. My name is Evelyn. That's better. Nice to meet you. Evelyn, you already know me, that's what. Let me not bother you with any more questions. You're tired and you're cold. I'll play you dinner. Eat a little. I'll make up your bed for you. I will? Nodded Evelyn. Stephen quickly heated up the food and left the girl alone. He himself headed to John's former nursery and made his bed. In the morning, Stephen woke up early and started to get ready for work, when suddenly he remembered that today was a day off. Also, suddenly the thought came into his head that what had happened last night had not been a dream. Putting on a homemade tracksuit, the man left the bedroom and quietly peeked into the room where he had put his guest to bed the night before. Evelyn was lying wrapped up in a blanket with her head buried. Stephen did not bother to wake her. Immediately, he headed to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. He decided to make pancakes. It was a rare thing for him to be able to do. He remembered Camille, so easily handling the frying pan. A mound of flavorful pancakes had formed on the plate. Their odor had apparently awakened Evelyn. The girl, scoffing, entered the kitchen, but stopped on the threshold in indecision. Oh, Evelyn, good morning, Stephen greeted her. I didn't wake you up. You see, having fun. Wow! It looks appetizing, weakly, smiled the guest. I've never seen a man who fries pancakes. But you've still got it all ahead of you, laughed the man. Why are you standing there? Come on, sit down at the table. Do you live alone? Asked Evelyn, straining a pancake with jam. Do I now? Stephen sighed. It just seemed to me that the room I was sleeping in belonged to a boy. Yeah, that's right. I have a son, but he's all grown up. He's got a family now. I'm sorry to change the former nursery into something else, and there's no point. And the wife? Wife? Yeah. I had a wife. We're divorced. Camille never comes here. I've been living alone for 4 years now, adjusting little by little. Why did you get divorced? It's hard to explain. Actually, it's not complicated at all. I have such a job that I don't have time for my family. But it's not so bad on my own. I guess Evelyn is hanging tea with a spoon. I'd like to live alone too, but Stephen stretched out. I don't think it's going to work now. It's not a small tummy. Soon, you'll be on your own. A baby is something special for a woman. Camille, it was just John. And then he grew up, and everything went wrong. I'm afraid to have a baby, Evelyn suddenly declared. Why is that? No, I don't mean I'm afraid of childbirth. It's just that I can't raise him. What makes you think that? 1,000 women do it. Are you any worse? I'm no good. I don't want a child. And I don't need me. Evelyn said seriously to Stephen, sitting down next to her. I don't know what's happened to you, but you can't say that. What do you mean? You don't need your life. It is a great gift, and your words are nothing but a manifestation of youthful maximalism. What's wrong with that? I see before me a healthy young girl. Her arms and legs are intact. Of course, I could be wrong, but you look decent. I've been working in a hospital for almost 30 years. Believe me, I've seen a lot of things. And the worse a person's condition, the more desperate they cling to life. Sometimes real miracles happen. It's the will to live that helps people avoid death, not just my scalpel. I guess they have something to live for. Well, that's how it is for me. Stop talking in riddles, tell it like it is, or I won't be able to understand why you think this way and not that way. Of course you can say no. I'm not forcing you. But trust me, if there's anything I can do to help you, I will. And why would you do that? The girl was genuinely surprised. The same reason I helped you yesterday. I took an oath to help people, and what difference does it make whether I save them on the operating table or in some other way? I can see you don't believe me. It's hard to trust people these days, especially strangers. But know that I have no vested interests or anything like that. But if you don't tell me, I can't help you. Evelyn hesitated. She stared out the window for a long time. Finally, taking a deep breath, she made up her mind. I guess I'll have to tell you from the beginning, won't I? She asked Stephen. Yes, that would be best. Besides, we're in no hurry. It's a day off. Okay, she nodded. Evelyn had never known her parents. She was raised by her grandmother, Emily. The woman did not like to answer the girl's questions that concerned her mom and dad, limiting herself to the simple. Grow up, I'll tell you. You won't understand anyway. But Evelyn grew up, and the grandmother did not become more talkative. And the girl was not particularly interested in the secrets of her past. Moreover, the neighborhood gossip had already painted a not the most pleasant, but quite ordinary picture in front of her. Evelyn's mother drank a lot and constantly revolved not in the most decent circles. When she got pregnant, the woman did not give up her habits, but after giving birth, she quietly abandoned her daughter, going to an unknown destination. Evelyn did not grieve much about it. She did not know her mother. It was quite natural not to have feelings for such a person. But the girl loved her grandmother, despite the fact that she was strict and conservative. And her granddaughter was not spoiled. Emily was not a typical old woman. No one even had the tongue to call her that. It was not an old woman who managed to preserve her old beauty. Her late husband had been a military man of high rank, but her grandfather had died before Evelyn's newborn, so she knew nothing about him. The girl liked to look at pictures in old albums, on which a handsome mustachioed man in a ceremonial tunic embraced a young existing girl. Emily's features were easily recognizable in her. And Evelyn was surprised every time how good her beloved grandmother was. Emily did not spoil her granddaughters, but easily provided her with everything she needed. They lived in a large apartment in a Stalinist house, the windows framed by columns. As a child, Evelyn had a nanny, and all household duties fell on the housekeeper. Already at a young age, the girl realized that their family by the standards of society is quite well off. But for some reason, her grandmother still did not buy her dolls and beautiful dresses. Clothes were bought once a year, and only the most necessary. Instead of toys, books were waiting for the girl. Twice a week, Evelyn attended music school and painting class. If the girl was cold to drawing, the piano brought her into full delight. At home, they had an old German grand piano. Twice a year came tuner. Emily personally checked the results of his work, sitting down on a spinning chair and playing some complicated scales. Evelyn shared her grandmother's passion for music. Together, they learned the works of great composers. At the age of 12, Evelyn wrote her first sonata. It seemed to be a done deal. Immediately after school to enter the conservatory. There shouldn't have been any problems with admission. Emily had connections everywhere, and her granddaughter's talent was already an entrance ticket to this prestigious institution. But things changed abruptly. Fate sometimes throws up such trials that dramatically change the direction of life. And that's exactly what happened to Evelyn. That night, she stayed late at the music school. There was a concert coming up, and the teacher asked her to study a little longer. Evelyn agreed without hesitation. She was ready to sit at the piano and muse for hours. After warning her grandmother, the girl played an excerpt of a symphony with passion. When the rehearsal was over, Evelyn wandered home. The music school was only a couple of stops away, so despite the late hour, the girl decided to walk home. It was nice spring weather, and it was a sin to enjoy it. Evelyn walked along the deserted sidewalk with only the occasional car or passerby passing by. When it was only a short distance from home, she suddenly stopped. A big dirt-eye dog jumped out in front of her, followed by another one, and then another and another. In all, Evelyn counted 7 dogs. The leader flattened his ears and buried his teeth. Paralyzed with fear, the girl didn't know what to do.
As luck would have it, there was no one around, and the nearest house was still somehow to be reached through a small square, clutching the strap of her bag tighter. Evelyn prepared herself for battle. She shouted loudly and swung at the approaching dogs.
Those backed off a bit, but continued to surround the girl. This went on for several minutes. Realizing that if no one was still around, there would be trouble, Evelyn decided to run. She yelled at the dogs one last time, took a good swing at the bag, and threw it at the leader. This distracted the pack briefly, and Evelyn ran with all her might. She realized that the dogs were running after her, but she didn't turn around as there were enough of them. And then the scary thing happened. The girl stumbled over a root and fell. Immediately, she felt a hot breath hit the back of her head, and a growl was heard. Immediately, her leg was pierced by a sharp pain. The girl screamed with all her might, begging for help. But the dogs didn't stop. They bit her. But Evelyn didn't even feel the pain. So badly was she restrained. The horror? There was only one thought in her head. Here you are, all of them. Suddenly, there was a sharp whistling sound. The girl felt that the dogs were moving away from her. A moment later, a man appeared beside her. In his hands was a huge truncheon with which he mercilessly beat in the yards, baying under the blows of the dogs. When the pack retreated, the stranger picked up the girl in his arms and carried her to the nearest house. How lucky you are, little girl, that I was in the neighborhood. I can't even imagine what would have happened now. I took you to the emergency room. They treated your wounds. Did they bite you? Of course, I don't want to go home, Uncle. Will Grandma worry? Evelyn took a chance. She'll worry if you die. We need to treat your wounds and give you tetanus and rabies shots. Who knows why those dogs attacked? I'll call your grandmother. Evelyn was seen by the doctor on duty. They put bandages on the bites, gave her the necessary shots. They even had to stitch up a couple places. The whole face of the girl was in abrasions and tears. It was in this form, granddaughter, saw her grandmother flying into the narrow corridor of the trauma center. Emily was crying. Evelyn had never seen anything like this before. The woman was hugging the girl, kissing her skinned cheeks. Thank God you're alive. When that man called me, I almost died myself. My girl, why didn't you take the bus? The stop is right in front of our driveway. Well, what's the use of talking about it now? Are you hurt? Not at all, Grandma. Evelyn tried to calm her down. It's all gone now. Just don't cry. It's gone, but not all of it. Later into the surgeon's office, the girl and her grandmother were told that the tendons in her arm were badly damaged. It's not life-threatening, but the mobility of the left hand will be permanently limited. For Evelyn, this meant a complete collapse of all her plans. The grandmother then turned pale, clutched her granddaughter's healthy hand tightly and said, I won't leave it like that. She's just a child. Is it impossible to find a good doctor? But the doctors just shrugged their shoulders. The next 2 years were a nightmare for Evelyn. Emily dragged her to hospitals, even taking her abroad once. Her mobility was restored, but still not completely. It did not interfere with living, but professional piano playing could be forgotten. Even simple scales were difficult for the girl. Evelyn fell into apathy. She almost stopped eating and only looked longingly at the piano. She passed her school exams and received her certificate. She didn't know what to do next. Emily assigned Raku, the girl, to the philology department. Evelyn learned without pleasure. All her conscious life, she had dreamed of a career as a pianist, and now just had to take and give up this dream. Everything began to get better when in the 3rd year of the girl met Christopher. It was love at first sight. The guy very beautifully courted, even a couple of times arranged real concerts under her windows. Emily was skeptical. Most of all, she wanted her granddaughter to finish the institute and quietly establish her life. All this love could interfere a lot. Since childhood, her grandmother had been protecting Evelyn, just so that she would not repeat the fate of her mother. Could she have found Frau with burning feelings? In the end, Emily just gave up. Besides, Christopher was not the worst candidate. The boy came from a decent family, did not drink, did not smoke, did not try to drag Evelyn to noisy parties. Gradually, the grandmother came to terms with the choice of her granddaughter and stopped interfering with her. Christopher often visited them, even sometimes played the piano. He had also studied at a music school, but he was not seriously interested in music. And when Evelyn graduated from the institute, he immediately proposed to her. The girl was happy. Her grandmother, too. They were seriously preparing for the wedding. When the worst happened, Christopher died. He went to visit relatives in a neighboring town. On the highway, his car was hit by a truck at full throttle. The guy died on the spot. When the ambulance arrived at the scene, there was nothing that could be done. It was a real blow to Evelyn. Nerves gave up, so much so that the girl ended up in a hospital bed. There she was informed that she was expecting a child. Emily supported her granddaughter as best she could, but how could that comfort the grief? Evelyn was discharged from the hospital. The girl almost never got out of bed. Emily invited home Evelyn's psychologists and their friends, even some kind of herbalist. Gradually, these measures took effect. The blush returned to her cheek. She began to eat and even sometimes went out for walks, baby. The grandmother said, bringing another bag of fruit, "You need to eat well now. You're going to have a baby very soon. You want it to be healthy, don't you?" "I do." Grandmother nodded at Evelyn and began to chew an apple. This baby meant a lot to her. It was the last bit of her beloved Christopher left in this world. Little by little, life was getting better. 4 months had passed since the accident. Evelyn appeared quite distinguishable tummy. Grandmother became much softer and piled granddaughter with all kinds of gifts for her and not yet born baby. But fate had already prepared the girl new trials. In the morning, Evelyn sat in the kitchen. She felt for the first time how the baby inside her was moving. When Emily entered, the girl immediately shared this news with her. The woman smiled and was about to say something, when suddenly she turned sharply pale and began to fall. Evelyn was frightened and tried to pick up her grandmother, but did not have time. Emily was lying on the kitchen floor unconscious. Her granddaughter tried to bring her to her senses, but nothing worked. She immediately called an ambulance. The ambulance took a long time to arrive. All this time, Evelyn ran around Emily, lying on the floor in a panic, applying compresses to her forehead. When the doctors finally arrived, it was too late. Emily was dead. Evelyn, upon hearing the doctor's verdict, lost her senses herself. She is swallowed up in some kind of darkness. Tenacious paws were deliberately driving into her neck and stomach. She wanted to scream. All that came out of her lips was emptiness. Emily was buried next to her husband. The woman died suddenly of a ruptured aneurysm in her brain. Even if the doctors had arrived in time, it is not certain that she could have been saved. A friend of the deceased was responsible for organizing the funeral because Evelyn was simply unable to do it. The girl was in some kind of devastated state. She was sedated. It was dangerous for the baby. But even more dangerous would be a nervous breakdown, the second death of a loved one. In such a short space of time, Evelyn's psyche was irreparably damaged. She didn't think about anything at all. Either she didn't want to, or the drugs had that effect. She didn't go to the wake. One of her friends drove her home and stayed to watch her. Evelyn was woken up by her friend's voice. "Wake up. There's a woman here to see you." "Leave me alone. I don't want to see anyone," muttered the girl and turned away from her friend. "She says you're related?" "She insists on seeing me. I had to let her in." "Why?" Disgruntled Evelyn replied, rising up on the pillows. "I don't have any relatives anymore. They're all dead." "You'll kick her out." Okay, nodded her friend and left the bedroom. A couple minutes later, Evelyn heard a noise through her sleep. The door to the bedroom opened again. On the threshold stood some unfamiliar woman. Evelyn looked at her with an uncomprehending stare. She had seen that face somewhere before. Huh, exactly. A sudden thought had crossed her mind the morning of the funeral. That woman was looking at me strangely. I wonder what she wants. She says she's a relative, but I've never seen her before today. Maybe some distant relative of Grandma's, but what does she want from me? What do you want? Evelyn tried to make her voice harsher, but it was no good. Hello, Evelyn. Checking, sluggishly the stranger. Here we meet at last. Who are you? Why have you come here? Don't you know I'm in grief? I don't want to see anyone. We're all in grief. Suddenly, the woman said, Don't you remember me? You're just a girl, but believe me, there's no one closer to you now. With these words, the woman sat down on the edge of the bed and pulled Evelyn's worst arm. The girl staggered back. I don't understand you, she shouted. Go away! You're frightening me. I'm not going anywhere now, my little girl. I've lived alone for too long. Now that witch is gone and no one will stop me from being with my daughter Nika, that Evelyn has gone even paler. You're talking nonsense. And what right do you have to call my grandmother a witch? Get out! Where would I go? The woman laughed. This is my home. I was born here. Look, I even have a registration. The woman held out her passport to Evelyn. With trembling hands, the girl opened the burgundy little book. On the first page was Wendy Konstantinovna. On the spread with the Propiska, there was a stamp with Evelyn's home address. There must be some mistake. You're all lying. Evelyn was indignant. Her first inclination was to tear up their passport, but she wouldn't have had the strength for that anyway. There's no mistake, Evelyn, Wendy grinned. I'm your mom? You don't know anything. My so-called mother, your beloved grandmother, kicked me out and wouldn't even let me in. In fact, she totally pried me away from you. You knew her. No law could have helped. All because she didn't think I was worthy. Wait. Evelyn even stood up. Why are you telling me all this? You think I'm gonna fly? And then you're just gonna shake your passport at me and that's it. I don't believe what you say. My grandmother really didn't tell me much. But if you've never found a way to contact me in 20-odd years, she was right. I can't call you a mother. I'm telling you, I tried, but as long as Emily was alive, she did everything she could to keep us from seeing each other. Don't be ridiculous. Cheers! Evelyn laughed. I didn't live under lock and key. I went to school, I went to music school. There was plenty of time to walk when you could stop me and tell me everything. Where were you when I was attacked by stray dogs? Where? Don't you understand anything? Wendy shook her head. Anyway, I'm going to stay here. I have every right to live in this apartment. Your beloved grandmother didn't even bother to sign me out. And I'm not stupid enough to do it myself. How dare you? You're nobody here. I just called the police. Call me wherever you want, beba. Only the truth is on my side. Turns out Wendy wasn't kidding. She was registered in Emily's apartment, so she had the same rights as Evelyn. The girl consulted lawyers, but they were powerless. One lawyer was ready to help, but he asked for a sum that Evelyn simply did not have. But the worst was ahead. The mayor's office completely justified all the rumors about herself. She drank all the time, often bringing in some shady men. Evelyn just stayed locked up in her room, trying not to have any contact with her mother. She hid all the valuables she found so that drunken company couldn't get to them. But when Evelyn's bedroom door handles lingered one night, and a male voice demanded she saw it off immediately, her patience broke. She sold some valuable things that had belonged to her grandmother and went to that lawyer again. A week later, he called the girl to him and told her something that did not please Evelyn at all. "You see, Evelyn Pomashchikov," said the lawyer. "I'm afraid that I can't help you. I'm ready to return the deposit minus the costs." "I don't understand you." Evelyn frowned. "We won't be able to get your mother out of the apartment." "Why not?" "She hasn't lived here for over 20 years. She hasn't even paid the utilities. She has no rights at all." "That's true. But your grandmother's big mistake was not signing her out herself in time. She didn't even go to court to collect on her daughter's debts. And there were no debts. So from the point of view of the law, everything looks like a verbal agreement between relatives. There's nothing to dig up. But it's not just that. What else did Evelyn do to make the case? Tell me, did your grandmother have a will?" "A will?" Evelyn asked. "I don't even know." "I guess she must have had something. The thing is, I couldn't find any record of a registered will anywhere. This means that by law, the only heiress will not be you, but her daughter. Of course, she won't inherit until 5 months later." "Are you kidding me?" Evelyn interrupted. "That's crazy." "What does that mean? She has every right to throw me out on the street." "No, she doesn't." The lawyer hastened to calm the girl. "You are registered in the apartment, and for eviction by court she has no grounds. But she can dispose of the property alone. Of course, if your grandmother still made a will, then the case is different. If there's no will, Grandma didn't think she was going to die. She probably didn't even know there was a problem. From what you tell me, Emily wasn't stupid. I don't know. See if her address book has contacts for notaries or something." "I'm powerless for now. I'm sorry." Evelyn was devastated. She had no idea things could turn out this way. She was already 6 months pregnant, completely exhausted physically and mentally, and there were simply no acquaintances who could really help. "I wonder if this woman knows about everything," thought Evelyn, walking back home. If she does, then her so sudden return is understandable. But even if she doesn't, there's still nothing I can do. I just can't believe Grandma was so careless. Why didn't she kick my mother out of the apartment years ago? Did she forgive her? I mean, it's her own daughter after all. Grandma was kind. She couldn't do such a mean thing to a loved one, no matter what kind of person she was. At home, Evelyn was in for a surprise. Wendy sat in the kitchen alone. There were no guests tonight. When the girl entered, she immediately
Pounced on her with questions. "Daughter!" "What don't I understand?" Wendy said aggressively. "Where's all that witch's treasure?" As I recall, she had some gold and some antique figurines. "Were you hiding it all from me?" "What do you care?" Evelyn said angrily.
But they were. So what? These things don't belong to you. Who do they belong to? You, doggy. Until the will is read, they don't belong to anyone. A will? Wendy laughed. I don't think the old corgi had time to make one. She did, Evelyn suddenly blurted out, though she knew it wasn't true. Wendy was somewhat taken aback by the words. Yeah, lie more. Where is it? You think I'm so dumb I didn't punch anything? Don't look at me. Looks can be deceiving. Do you know how many people I know? I know, Evelyn replied wryly. I've seen your acquaintances. Don't look at those drunkards. I'm talking about other people. Your grandmother didn't have a will. You know what that means. And what does it mean? Trying to stay calm, the girl asked. and that you have no rights neither to this apartment nor to what's in it. That's what all will be mine, and it's in your interest to quickly pack your things, and at the Met on all four sides will do. Suddenly, Evelyn dared. Legally, I can live here as long as I need to. To get me out, you'll have to find a good reason. And I won't give you one, believe me. I know people too. And by the way, don't be fooled by the absence of a will in the registry. My grandmother had her own notary. She went to him shortly before she died. It's just that they haven't had time to put the form number on the official list yet. Not bluffing, child, laughed Wendy nervously. Anyway, we'll know the truth soon enough. In the meantime, I suggest you don't screw things up with me. Give me some money. I'm broke. Evelyn did not speak to her further, but simply walked out of the kitchen. As she approached her room, she noticed that the lock had been tried. She wanted to attack her mother with reproaches, but at that moment, the baby in her belly stirred actively. It was like they were talking her out of it. Evelyn simply opened the door and locked herself inside. Sitting on the bed, she thought it best to move all of her grandmother's hidden valuables somewhere. Emily didn't have much jewelry, especially since Evelyn had already sold some of it to pay her lawyer. Evelyn opened the box where she'd put everything she'd found earlier. There were several porcelain figurines, her grandfather's gold drinking pen with a commemorative engraving, a jewelry box, and an elegant egg. Evelyn doubted it was authentic, for her grandmother had never forbidden her to play with it. She should have their jeweler take it apart, appraise it. The girl twirled the weighty piece in her hands. What's the use, though? There are no documents on it anyway. You cannot sell it. And I won't be able to sell my grandmother's piece. No matter how much it's worth, I can't. It doesn't have to be hidden somewhere. Some woman didn't pick the lock. She wouldn't blink an eye. Take it to a pawn shop. Evelyn hid the box under the bed and started thinking about where to take everything. She didn't trust acquaintances, even friends. When a man sees big money, his sanity goes into a fog. Storage lockers bury. It was possible to rent a safety deposit box. This option seemed to Evelyn the most reliable. She fell asleep thinking about it. The next day,
Evelyn got up very early and slipped out of the apartment unnoticed, hiding her grandmother's things in her gym bag. She was very afraid of waking her mother, who would no doubt try to brazenly take away what was in the girl's hands.
But Evelyn feared for nothing. From the kitchen came snoring. The girl took a cab to the branch of the bank of her choice. She was immediately consulted on the rental of safe deposit boxes. Look, smiled the girl. Access to the box is not. That is, you can come at any time when the bank is open and go to the employee behind that counter. You give him a special code and a code word. He checks everything and takes you to the vault. There you open your safe deposit box with the key that you were given when you signed the contract. And that's okay. Evelyn nodded. Will anyone else have access to my box? No, of course not, she smiled. To be exact, only someone who knows the code and has the key has access. You don't even need to show your passport. The code changes after each visit and is known only to you. Believe me, it's very secure. Not a single customer has complained yet. Believe me? Replied Evelyn. Good, let's make a contract. After signing the papers, she was escorted to the vault, where she put all of her grandmother's valuables in the specified box. The girl hung the key around her neck so she would have it with her at all times. This eliminated the possibility of Wendy getting to it someday. But even with the key, she wouldn't know where the valuables were. And without the code, she couldn't get into the vault. Relieved, Evelyn returned home, where the party was already in full swing. Her mother was awake and had guests. There were some strange types and their equally strange companions hanging around the apartment. The door to Evelyn's bedroom stood wide open. The doorknob had just been knocked out of the leaf and was dangling helplessly on a single screw.
What the hell? Enraged Evelyn, and almost lashed out at her mother. If one thing is missing from my room, I call the police. For now, you and I have equal rights, and I will not tolerate this cesspool. Evelyn didn't say anything else and just went to her room. We barricaded ourselves from the inside. She called the foreman and arranged for him to come as soon as possible to fix the lock. There was still plenty of time until evening. There wasn't much to do. Evelyn couldn't even go into the kitchen to make herself some tea. She ordered food from the delivery service, waited for the handyman, and when the door was repaired, breathed a sigh of relief and collapsed on the bed. In her hands, she held her grandmother's old notebook. Emily was an old school person and kept all her contacts in this small notebook her grandfather had given her. Grandma didn't trust the phone.
Evelyn flipped through the thin pages, thickly written in neat handwriting. Grandmother had known a lot of people. To her credit, at your service. Robert, I'm sorry to call you so early. My name is Evelyn. Evelyn, I found your card in my grandmother's notebook.
Perhaps you knew her? Emily? Of course I know the alley. Why didn't she call? Oh, you probably don't know. Grandma died 2 months ago. Oh, really? The man grimaced. I wasn't even informed. Not surprising, though. I just got back from overseas. Robert, please, Evelyn interrupted him. I don't even know if you can ask such questions over the phone, but it's very important. Ask, my dear. Don't be shy. Tell me, did you by any chance make a will for your grandmother? Evelyn. After a long pause, the man answered. Can you come to my office now? It's not far from your house. Of course. Evelyn perked up. Half an hour later, she was already in Robert's office. An elderly, stately man met her at the door of the reception area and immediately led her into his office. Are you going to be a mom soon? He smiled. Seated the girl in a chair. Yes, in a couple of months, Robert. What about our phone conversation? The situation I'm in is very unpleasant. Evelyn summarized to the notary everything that had happened since her grandmother's death. Evelyn, you don't have to worry so much. You see, Emily came to see me and we made a will. According to it, you're the sole heir. But there's just one problem. What's that? Evelyn froze. Emily insisted that she keep the original. But I only have a copy. It's not legally binding. But there's definitely no paperwork at home. I looked into it. The point is, if you can't find the original, Wendy can inherit. But why would Grandma do that? The girl looked at the notary without understanding. I have no right to interfere in my client's private affairs, huh? Perhaps she thought that she should give the paper directly to you or something else. She wasn't going to die, so she didn't have time. And now we'll never know. But where I can find that will, I have no idea. Think about it, girl. The man with the copy patted her on the shoulder. We will only be able to delay the entry of the first-line heirs, but no more. Evelyn walked out in total confusion. On the one hand, she was glad that there was a will, and that her grandmother had thought of everything in advance. On the other, the chances of finding the document were slim to none. Wendy wasn't home. Evelyn was even surprised at that. The girl decided not to waste time and began to search every inch of the apartment. She looked even into the piano, but there was not even a trace of paper anywhere. It was unlikely that the grandmother had given it to acquaintances for safekeeping. Evelyn pondered, but then where is it? There was no answer to that question. In the evening, her mother brought some dubious men again. There were 3 of them. Evelyn locked herself in her room as usual and tried not to be distracted by the noise outside. She herself did not notice how she fell asleep. She woke up to a thud on the door. "Open up!" A drunken male voice shouted from the other side. Evelyn was scared out of her wits. She grabbed her phone and started dialing the emergency number with trembling fingers. But she didn't have time. The door cracked open, and a formidable-looking figure stood firmly on his feet. "That's the end of it," the guest announced. "Now you and I are having fun. Get the hell out of here, Evelyn. I'm calling the police. We'll be fine until they get here." "Cheers," laughed the man. "Your mom says you're a perky girl. That's just the kind of girl I like." Evelyn jumped out of bed and armed herself with a table lamp. "Stay back," she warned in a threatening tone, clutching the lamp tightly. The man took a decisive step in her direction. Evelyn kicked him in the head with all her might. It was enough to make the man lose his balance and howl in pain. "You," he said. But Evelyn had already jumped out of the bedroom and dashed for the hallway. The door to the apartment was wide open. But that was the least of the girl's worries. Her only desire was to get away from the threatening danger. She grabbed the coat and sneakers hanging on the coat rack and, holding it all in her hands, ran out of the apartment. "That's how I ended up on the bench," Evelyn continued. "I put on my shoes and coat downstairs. Already there, I realized that I didn't have my phone, keys, money, or documents with me. Everything had been left at home. I just couldn't go back there, even if the man had left. It was the same thing. I can't risk the baby, and there's no way to smoke that woman out of her apartment without a will. I wandered around town for 24 hours trying to figure out what to do. And then I just took her to this yard, sat on a bench. And then, you know what happened. Poor girl," Stephen sighed. "How much have you been through? But why didn't you go to your friends?" "I don't know. I was in a state of shock. I didn't want to do anything. In fact, Christopher and then Grandma's deaths had taken a heavy toll on my psyche. I became kind of stale. Girls started talking to me less and less. I feel like even if one of them let me in, what's next? I have nowhere to go anyway. And no prospects, then, and with a baby." So Evelyn tapped her fingers on the table. "Stephen, here's what we're going to do, since you've got nowhere to go. I suggest you stay with me until things change. There are rooms available. We won't be in each other's way. Besides, I can't send you, pregnant as you are, to nowhere. No, Stephen, how could I sit on your neck like that? That's my business. I'll bet there's enough money. The only thing is, you can cook and do some housework. We'll consider it your downtime pay. And by the way, you're a philologist by training, aren't you? Yes, Evelyn nodded. I don't see where Stephen is going with this. Have you ever thought of tutoring? Of course not, she smiled. I've done some tutoring before, but I don't know how I can do it now. You shouldn't think about it for now. You still need to give birth first, but for the future, if anything, you can take students here. Serious rounded eyes. Evelyn? But I still don't understand why you're helping me. I'm nothing to you. You know, Evelyn, Nika, you can't just leave people in the lurch. If you're in a position to help. I bet people walked by you yesterday, and not one of them even asked if you needed help. No one at all. It's this indifference that destroys faith in miracles. But there are still people who are ready to share their happiness. And the degree of kinship doesn't matter at all, but you don't even have documents, everything is at home, and I doubt they'll even let me in. It's not a big deal. Oh, we'll come together, call the police if necessary. Are you registered there? Will you come and get everything you need? They won't dare attack me. Evelyn had been staying with Stephen for 2 months. She was about to go into labor. As promised, the man went with her to her grandmother's apartment and helped her pick up her things. Wendy, only smirking, but didn't interfere. It was only to her advantage that her daughter was leaving. Stephen had a rough shift that day.
He called Evelyn and told her he would be late. By late afternoon, a real storm was brewing. It was snowing so hard that it covered everything. Around midnight, the man left the hospital and realized that it would be extremely difficult to get home by car. The snow removal equipment was not coping. The entire parking lot was spotted, and the cars resembled giant snowdrifts. Stephen dug his car out, but when driving out, it immediately became deeply buried. He called Evelyn, but she didn't pick up. Sleeping, probably, the man thought. I'm a fool to her husband. He decided to walk home. It wasn't that far to get there. Stephen knew a shortcut, but the snow was in the way. The man leisurely overcame the snowdrifts, rejoicing like a child. When he was halfway there, he suddenly felt a strange sense of uneasiness.
His intuition had helped him many times in his life, so Stephen couldn't just ignore that inner signal. He immediately thought of Evelyn. He dialed her number again, but the answering machine came on. The feeling of unease was growing. It couldn't be that she couldn't hear the call. The sound never goes off. Stephen was nervous. What if something had happened or she was in labor? He quickened his pace. When the house was a couple of 100 meters away, the man tried to run. His feet stomped in the snow, but some inner force forced him to keep moving forward. At last, Stephen reached the house. The snow had already been cleared, so it was easier to run. He went into the entrance. In the elevator, he laughed, looking at his reflection in the mirror. He resembled a snowman or Santa Claus, entirely covered with white blind spears. Stephen ran into the apartment on the move, throwing off his long snow-covered jacket. Evelyn, from somewhere in the depths of the apartment, heard sounds. The man immediately ran there. Evelyn was lying on the bathroom floor, holding her stomach. There was some kind of puddle around her. Jesus, girl, you're having a baby. I heard the bell ringing, but I can't get up. It hurts so bad. The girl tried to smile. It's labor, and your water's already broken. There's so much snow, the ambulance won't get there. I'll have to deliver your baby. Let me help you to the bed. Stefan lifted the girl off the floor and carefully carried her to the bedroom. After laying her down, he immediately prepared hot water, a clean towel, and antiseptics. He did call for an ambulance, not really hoping for a quick arrival. Evelyn was in a lot of agony. The contractions were very frequent. Breathe, girl. Stephen soothed her. Yes, that's it. The man was in time. If he hadn't hurried, Evelyn wouldn't have made it on her own. There's no telling what would have happened, but it was all right. Half an hour later, Evelyn emerged from their agony with a pink, healthy baby boy. Stephen carefully cut his umbilical cord, washed off the blood, and wrapped him in a soft towel. The doorbell rang. The man handed the boy to his mother and went to open the door. It was the ambulance crew. "Oh, Stephen!" The woman with the tired face was surprised. "Hello! I didn't expect to see you. We're not late. It's so snowed in out there." "I made it." The man smiled. "You wouldn't believe it. I got home just in time for the birth. And here's Evelyn, your daughter." The paramedic asked doubtfully. "Don't you have a son?" No, just a relative." "She should be taken to the hospital right now." "Of course, I've done everything, but it's not a big deal." "Yes, of course, we'll do it right away." "Why don't you get her things together?" When Evelyn was brought to the hospital and put in the room, she called Stephen. "Look, I'm just going to curl up on the floor in the bathroom. You're not going to believe me, but tell me." "I will!" Stephen answered confidently, squeezing the girl's hand. "I saw my grandmother come in and hold my hand as well. Was it a painful shock you had?" "It's not uncommon for hallucinations to occur." "No, it wasn't a hallucination," Evelyn argued hotly. "I could feel her energy. But that's not what's important. Here." Evelyn took off the chain around her neck that held the key. "Is this the key to the safe deposit box?" Stephen wondered. "But why do I need it? Please go to the bank tomorrow and get the egg I told you about from the vault, and then bring it back here. See if it was a hallucination, access code. I'll text you right now." Stephen did everything Evelyn asked. The next day, he brought her the egg. It was a beautiful replica of the famous wares. Stephen recognized it immediately from the materials. Of course, it was not the original, but it was extremely skillful. Evelyn, with trembling hands, took the blue little egg framed with filigree gold ligature. She twirled it for a while, then pressed her finger on the small bird that adorned the top. Immediately, the egg clicked and opened like a jewelry box. Evelyn and Stephen looked at each other. "I can't." The girl held out the box to the man. "See for yourself what's inside." Stephen carefully lifted the lid. Inside the egg was a sheet folded several times. He carefully unfolded the paper. "Well," Evelyn mumbled impatiently. "What is it?" "Tell me," frowned Stephen, running his eyes over the lines. "Did your grandmother tell you where to find it? Is it the will?" "Yes." Evelyn's eyes sewed. "Yes!" "And it looks like you were right," laughed Stephen. "Did Emily really come to see you?"